Hello and welcome to Ballotpedia. I'm Erica, and today we're taking a look at an important ballot measure coming up in the state of Maine on November 4th, 2025. Maine Question 1 will appear on ballots as an indirect initiated state statute, and it proposes several changes to how elections are conducted in the state. A yes vote supports changing Maine's election procedures by requiring voters to present a photo ID for both in-person and absentee voting, with an exception for those with religious exemptions. Requiring the Secretary of State to provide free photo ID cards to voters without a driver's license, prohibiting family members from returning absentee ballots to a drop box, mandating a bipartisan team of election officials to collect ballots from drop boxes, and eliminating the option to request an absentee ballot automatically for each election without a separate request, among other changes. A no vote opposes changing the election procedure law. The key changes proposed in this initiative center around 5 main areas of election law. First, it would require all voters to present photo identification for both in-person and absentee voting. However, there would be an exception for voters with religious exemptions to being photographed. Second, the state would be required to provide free photo ID cards through the Secretary of State's office for voters who don't have a driver's license. Under this measure, acceptable forms of photo identification would include a Maine driver's license, Maine non-driver identification card, U.S. passport, military ID, Maine National Guard ID, or Veterans Affairs identification card. Third, the measure would change absentee ballot procedures. Family members would no longer be allowed to return absentee ballots to drop boxes, and voters would lose the ability to automatically receive absentee ballots for each election without submitting a separate request. Currently, senior citizens can sign up to automatically receive absentee ballots before each election. This measure would eliminate that option, requiring all voters to submit separate written requests for each election. The deadline for requesting absentee ballots would also change, moving from 3 business days before an election to 7 business days before. For absentee voters, the photo ID requirement would mean including either a driver's license number, non-driver ID number, or a copy of photo identification with their ballot application. Fourth, it would modify drop box rules by requiring bipartisan teams of election officials rather than municipal clerks to collect ballots from drop boxes. This measure would limit municipalities to just 1 secured drop box each, removing the current option for additional drop boxes. It would also change who has access to these drop boxes. Instead of municipal clerks holding the keys, bipartisan teams of election officials would be responsible for collecting ballots. For third-party ballot delivery, if someone other than the voter returns an absentee ballot, the voter would need to provide complete information about that person, including their photo ID in the absentee ballot application. And fifth, this measure would eliminate phone requests for absentee ballots, requiring written applications instead. Supporters of this initiative argue that requiring ID to vote is common sense and will help maintain confidence in Maine's elections. They view these measures as reasonable steps to strengthen election security. Opponents express concerns that the initiative goes far beyond simple voter ID requirements. They argue that the additional changes to absentee voting procedures could create unnecessary barriers for voters. It's worth noting that Maine would not be alone in requiring voter identification. Currently, 35 states require some form of ID to vote at polling places on Election Day, though most provide exceptions. Of these, 23 states specifically require photo ID, while 12 do not. The remaining 15 states, including Maine, currently do not require identification to vote at the polls. When Maine voters see their ballots on November 4th, the official question will read, quote, "Do you want to change Maine election laws to eliminate 2 days of absentee voting, prohibit requests for absentee ballots by phone or family members, end ongoing absentee voter status for seniors and people with disabilities, ban prepaid postage on absentee ballot return envelopes, limit the number of drop boxes, require voters to show certain photo ID before voting, and make other changes to our elections," end quote. Now, before this question even reaches voters, did you know it became the subject of a legal dispute over how it should be worded on the ballot? On May 12th, 2025, the organization Voter ID for Me, which supports the ballot initiative known as Question 1, filed a petition with Cumberland County Superior Court. The group argued that the ballot question, as written by Maine Secretary of State Democrat Shana Bellows, misrepresented their initiative. The campaign believed the wording issued by the Secretary of State's office did not accurately reflect the intent and content of their proposed voter ID measure. On June 13th, 2025, Cumberland County Superior Court delivered its ruling, determining that the ballot question did not need to be changed and that the wording issued by the Secretary of State would remain as written for the 2025 ballot. The plaintiffs then filed an appeal of the court's decision with the state Supreme Court. On July 8, 2025, the court heard oral arguments in the case. During the proceedings, Patrick Strawbridge, representing the plaintiffs, argued that the ballot question lacked conciseness. He contended that its unusual length for a voter initiative necessarily made it less clear for voters to understand. Defending the Secretary of State's position, Attorney Jonathan Bolton countered that the question could not be misleading because all information contained within was accurate. 3 days later, on July 11th, 2025, the Maine Supreme Judicial Court issued its final ruling in favor of the Secretary of State and affirming the judgment of the lower court's decision. With this ruling, the ballot measure title remained unchanged and will appear on the ballot as originally ordered. You can always stay up to date on this ballot measure and so many others on our website at ballotpedia.org. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure you subscribe to our channel for more nonpartisan, fact-based information on America's politics and elections.